I'm John. I work as a medical examiner in Atlanta, a job you might describe as quiet and ordinary. In my world, the dead hold no secrets, and in the stillness of the city morgue, life's worst mysteries are distilled into reports and paperwork. But there's one night I can't explain, and every time I think about it, a chill slides down my spine. The sky was ugly that night, with a storm twisting the city skyline into a mass of rain and shadows. I had just finished an autopsy when a knock came at the door. It was Officer Paul, a local beat cop, carrying the newest resident of my cold domain. A John Doe, found in the alleys, drowned according to preliminary on-scene checks. "This one feels off, John," Paul said before leaving. "No ID, no witnesses, just that creepy pendant around his neck. Be careful." His words lingered even when his footfalls receded into the storm. I took a look at the body, arranged on the steel table in front of me. It was a man, surely not more than 25, his face frozen in the peaceful lullaby of death's embrace. Around his neck was a pendant, an odd symbol etched into it. I had an odd pang of fear as I held it. Shaking off the feeling, I began my work. A loud slam echoed through the morgue as the lights flickered and went out. I fumbled for the flashlight on my table, clicking it on and playing it across the room. The whispers began then. "John." They lilted, gusting around the room like a breeze, raising the hairs on my neck. I jerked around, but the room was empty. Then, a scream. My eyes shot back to the table. To this day, I don't know if it was fear playing tricks, but I'll swear the corpse had twisted, its eyes wide open, staring at me. In the flashlight's beam, those dead eyes had a strange gleam to them. As I recoiled in dread, I could only watch as the body contorted on the table, jerking as though attacked by invisible hands. My blood ran cold as I backed away towards the door. Panic gripped me as I fumbled with the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. Doom, the whisper turned into hundreds, surrounding me. The room twisted around me, shadowy figures contorted in the flashlight's beam. "Doom," the voice repeated, closer, right in my ear, the smell of decay filling my senses. I retched, my skin crawling as those icy eyes bored into me. Clasping my hands over my ears, I curled on the floor as my world became a spiraling pit of terror. Just when I could take no more, the morning light penetrated the grimy morgue windows, and the whole episode unraveled as quickly as it started. The lights flickered back on, the silence returning to its peaceful, isolating thickness. John Doe was back on his table, all signs of his unnatural animation gone. Every noise makes me jerk now. Every shadow in the morgue holds a sinister presence. I've tried to rationalize it, tried to convince myself it was fatigue or that I hallucinated that phantom-filled horror. But the icy dread when I crossed that John Doe's table, the chill that grabs hold of me in the silence of my office, they're all too real. Even now, when I perform an autopsy, I shudder, dreading what secrets the hollow skulls may unfold. My morgue hides a spectral secret, its walls echoing a horror that lingers after the dead. Now, when I punch out each night, I leave with a fervent hope that the dead remain at peace and that I never have to cross paths with my doom in the silent depths of the morgue again. I'd always found a melancholic harmony in the solitude of the morgue, but one night shattered my peace. It was a frost-bitten winter night, the darkness spreading its inky cloak over the city of Austin. On this particular night, I was expecting the arrival of a John Doe, found dead under strange circumstances in a seedy end of town. Officer Ryan, a grizzled veteran, came in dragging his latest find. Throwing a concerned glance my way, he lifted the body bag onto the examination table. "Be careful with this one, Doc." Ryan's voice was hushed, but I could hear the trepidation. His eyes glinted in the sterile light of the morgue as he pointed towards a bizarre pendant hanging from John Doe's neck. It was an odd glyph, one I'd never seen before. After Ryan left, I began my work. pulling off the white sheet, revealing a man in his mid-30s with a gaunt appearance and a peculiar cyanotic pallor that wasn't just attributable to death, seeming more like an aftereffect of extreme fear. Then, with a sudden sputter, the lights shut off, leaving only the soft glow of my emergency light rendering long throwing shadows that danced along the tiled floors and bleached walls. In the enshrouding darkness, a whisper tiptoed through the air, so faint it was as though someone was exhaling words. "Free us." I froze, the cold suddenly leaching into the marrow of my bones. The whisper was there again, louder this time, pinpricks of fear blossoming into a full-blown dread. I turned towards the source of the sound. I couldn't believe my eyes. The corpse's chest was heaving, as if it was gasping for air. Its eyes snapped open, and they were not the vacant eyes of a dead man. They had a terrifying clarity. "Free us." The voice echoed as if emanating from the body itself. In a gut-clenching moment of terror, icy fear clutched my heart. Stumbling back, I knocked over a tray of my tools, the clang echoing in the silent morgue. I fumbled towards the door, my hands shaking as I tried to turn the knob. My instincts were thundering in my ears to get out. I tugged harder, but the door wouldn't budge. Trapped with a talking corpse, the chilling prospects played out in my mind. Before I could try to make sense of anything, the corpse's body started writhing, the sight taking my breath away. I pressed back against the door as it jerked violently, the table underneath it rattling ominously. "Free us." The room darkened further, the whispering becoming a cyclone of hysteria. I fought the urge to scream, dread squeezing my lungs. Without warning, the paralyzing torment ceased as dawn's first light filtered through the small window of the morgue. The corpse was unmoving, back to its peaceful state, as if nothing had happened. The once locked door creaked open, freed from its invisible barricade, as I stumbled out into the corridor, gasping for air. The terror of that night haunts me still. My morgue, once my sanctuary, is a constant reminder of that chilling encounter. The whispering voice, the violent convulsions, the fear engendered within me, they all lurk in the shadows and nooks of the morgue, itching to creep out if provoked. I cannot explain what unfolded that night, neither can I forget it, and there's nothing I dread more than hearing those whispers again. The dead were meant to be silent, and I hope they remain so, because in the quiet corners of my morgue, fear whispers, "Free us." I work at a morgue in the sleepy town of Rosemead. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, where the only disturbance happens when old Bill forgets to silence his car horn at 6 a.m. So you can imagine how shocked we were when we got a call about a body found in the old abandoned house at the end of Maple Street. It was late, around midnight when the call came in. I was on night duty and decided to stick around until the body arrived. Given how small our town is, we barely had any bodies coming in. And when we did, there was usually a familiar face. Heart attacks, illness, you get the picture. But this one, folks said he was a drifter who'd wandered into town. Officer Lowe, a burly, good-natured man who'd been in the force since I was in kindergarten, came in carrying the body. "Mike," he told me, "there's something strange about this one. No apparent wounds, no signs of a struggle, but he's got this odd pendant around his neck." The pendant was strange, all right, made of a dark, metallic material resembling obsidian. It was etched with unfamiliar symbols that set an ominous tone. Officer Lowe left. I was alone in the morgue with the drifter. I decided to start with the external examination. His face was marked by a terror I hadn't seen before. On unbuttoning his shirt, I found his skin was icy, cold even by a dead man's standards. Then the lights flickered off. Startled, I reached for my flashlight, breaking the eerie silence. I was met with the chilling hum of the backup generator and the red glow from its emergency light. Suddenly, a whisper curled through the room like fog sliding under a doorway. It was so faint that I thought I'd imagined it until I heard it again. "Help." A chill ran down my spine. The voice seemed to come from the body on the table. His eyes were open, the dull look of death replaced with what seemed like pleading desperation. "Help me." Surging terror gripped me. I watched in horror as the drifter began to writhe on the table, the metallic clang of his movements echoing ominously through the room. My heart pounded in my chest as if trying to break free. I backed away, stumbling against a tray of instruments. Their crash sounded deafening in the silence. I fell to the floor, my breath coming out in choked gasps. "No escape," the voice echoed, sounding different again, as if it was no longer coming from the body, but reverberating around the room. Trying to muffle my panicked breathing, I scrambled towards the door. I twisted the knob, pulled, but it wouldn't budge. I pushed against it with all the strength fear could summon, to no avail. Then, as dawn's first light streamed through the tiny window, everything stopped. The body lay still on the table. Its terror-filled eyes were closed again, and the strange pendant once again a simple piece of metal. Somehow, the door swung open easily. Cool morning air rushed in as I stumbled out of the morgue and into the sunlight. The fear that had held me captive gradually loosened its grip. That terrifying night changed everything. The morgue, my refuge of solace, turned into a house of fear for me. I keep expecting to hear that voice again, each echo in the cold, sterile room sending chills running down my spine. Thus, each night I spend there is a test of courage. They say the only thing to fear is fear itself. I say the only thing to fear is the whispering dead. My nights at the morgue had always been quiet, the silence broken only by resounding echoes of metallic sliders, signaling the end of each investigation. Nestled in a corner of a small town, mine was a lonely occupation. But I had always taken my job as a medical examiner seriously, each case bringing closure for grieving families. But one dreary November night, my mundane routine was shredded to pieces, leaving me racked with unease that I can still taste, even after several years. I was startled by the thunderous knock at midnight. Officer Hendricks, his face a silhouette under the moonlight, brought in the lifeless form of a young girl. Her name's Emily Westwood, 17. He grimaced, taking off his hat as a mark of respect. Clearing his throat, he continued, "Suspected OD, but no evidence to suggest. She was found on the outskirts of town. It's a pity." Emily's body, pristine and devoid of visible injuries, lay on my examination table. Her wide-open eyes held an eerie intensity that sent invisible fingers of unease skating up my spine. I hated to admit, but the vibe of that room was unlike any other. Hours bullet into each other as I began the autopsy. A peculiar sense of foreboding put my already heightened instincts into overdrive as I searched for a cause of death. The exceptionality of that night unfolded further when the lights flickered and died, plunging the already creepy morgue into a realm of darkness. Counting to 10, I waited for the backup generator, but it didn't kick in. Cursing under my breath, I fumbled around for a flashlight. When I switched on, I was stunned by the sight before me. Emily, not in her lifeless form, but standing rigidly as though alive. Her ash-blonde hair cascaded around a face now blanched of any color, cheeks streaked with fresh tears. In the initial shock, I stepped back, tripping over my own shock. "Are you, Emily?" My voice trembled, while I tried to comprehend the incomprehensible. She nodded and spoke, her voice a mere whisper that sliced through my stupor. I was murdered. Even as my racing heart protested against that claim, I couldn't tear my eyes from her spectral form. "By who, Emily?" I asked, already dreading her answer. "Brian Todd. He was my boyfriend," she divulged, her voice unexpectedly firm. "We fought. He didn't mean to, but he did." She described the night of her death. The argument instigated by jealousy, harmful words escalating to physical confrontation. I could almost smell the intoxicating scent of her fear, mixed with fresh earth and rain as she recounted her last moments. Her icy touch on my wrist was a jolt of reality. By the time she finished her story, her body had disappeared from the table. That only made her account eerier, more undeniable. The eeriness of what had transpired in this cold room was too real, too vivid. With sunrise, I found myself alone in the morgue. Emily's ghostly presence was gone, evaporated into thin air just as suddenly as it appeared. Armed with her confession, I rushed to Officer Hendricks, who, much to my surprise, didn't dismiss my story. And though he was skeptical at first, the subsequent confession from a guilt-addled Brian Todd and the post-mortem results convinced him. We found justice for Emily. That night remains etched into my soul, a haunting memory that forever altered how I perceive my chosen profession, and more prominently, the eerie morgue. Life, death, and the spectral realm in between. A realm that I breached during one unforgettable, chilling November night, changing the rhythm of this lone morgue forever. My life as a coroner in the small town of Barrington had always been surrounded by an inherent sense of unsettling quiet. My office, located in the basement of the rundown two-story municipal building, was a cold, relentless reminder of life's impermanence. It was not the dead that unsettled me, but the prospect of untold stories whispering in the echo void of their silence. This story, however, breathes life into my fear. It was a frigid night in mid-December, the soft whisper of snowfall blanketing the town's sleepy demeanor. Mary Beth, the senior officer, had called me into an evening shift for an unexpected case. "2 John Does found near Gravesend," she rumbled over the phone, the sadness undisguised in her usually stoic voice. The prospect of more unclaimed bodies added a somber note to my evening. Descending into my icy work domain was a routine I had come to find comforting in its familiarity. My world shrank into a bubble of fluorescent lighting, cold metallic counters, and the solitude of my task at hand. But that night, everything felt unnaturally askew. Pulling the drape from the first body, a wave of a strong metallic scent hit me, more intense than the stale whiffs that floated in the autopsy room regularly. This was different, thick with an edge of deep unease. My hands trembled as I went through the familiar steps of the autopsy, cold sweat forming on my brow. Each suture, every incision felt like an intrusive violation on the unnaturally cold, hardened skin. The usual detachment I could maintain began to dissolve, leaving me shaking with an odd sense of dread. Just as I finished cataloging the findings of the first John Doe, the lights in the basement flickered ominously. A low hum filled the room, and almost instinctively, I turned towards the darkened corner of the room. Despite the flickering fluorescent light, the room seemed to harbor an unnatural darkness that made my heart stutter in trepidation. From the deep corners of the room, a low cough echoed through the silence, a hoarse, hollow sound. The papers on my desk fluttered as a cold draft swept through the room, instantly plunging it into an almost timeless standstill. "Who's there?" I called out, the tremor in my voice belying my apprehension. A tall figure materialized from the shadows, held together by the weak tendrils of the flickering light. "Help us," he implored, his voice echoing from far away. I blinked in disbelief, my blood running cold as the figure mirrored the lifeless body on my examination table. My heart pounded in my chest, each word he spoke unfolding a grim tale of their demise. They were drifters who'd hitched a ride on the wrong truck, led into the wilderness, and dispatched with brutal promptness. Their bodies were discarded, their stories left untold. Until now. As the spectral figure's words tailed off, a second figure emerged from the dark, identical to the second John Doe who still lay untouched on my other table. He was silent, yet his hollow eyes spoke volumes, blinking in distress, confirming the earlier narrative. When the spectral figures faded with the rising sun, leaving me alone in the chilling silence of the basement, I rushed up the stairs and relayed the information to Mary Beth. Her initial disbelief gave way to somber resolution as she picked up the phone to report the details. The autopsies of the two later confirmed the stories of their spectral doubles, unsheathing their path to an unfortunate end, and ultimately leading to the arrest of a trucker from out of town. The morgue in Barrington, especially its unnerving basement, remains a stage for the untold stories of the unfortunate souls arriving on its metallic tables. My duty became more than just scientific investigation. I became a medium, a conduit between the living and the dead, and my solitude became the whispers of the untold stories seeking justice. While the morgue under Barrington continues to whisper tales in its unique cryptic tongue, the spectral incidents that one chilling December night changed my work and my life forever. It was no longer a familiar comfort. It was a haunting victim of unvoiced stories. The shiver that slides down your spine when you descend the steps into the basement is not just the chill of the room, it's the reminder of the spectral story that began and ended there.